why they called it a Reuben sandwich.
Uh, I'm president of Collinwood for YouTube, Joel Sage, joined by my buddy Patrick from McCray, author of the Dark Shadows Book and Bound. We're here to discuss episode 276, written by Ron Sproat, narrated by Kathryn Lee Scott, and directed by Lela Swift. So I really like Kathryn's opening narration. We get her later in the episode, but to start this episode, we get Jason McGuire, who's, he's ready to steal some jewels, and he's not listening to his one-time friend Willie Loomis. And I love, even though this is Dennis Patrick's last episode for a long while, I really love the interaction between him and John Carlin here before he gets killed off.
It's marvelous. I mean, the whole thing is just a masterpiece, but I'll get into more of that in a minute. What else? What else we got?
I really like the fact, too, that once he doesn't listen to him, you really see John Carlin's reaction. He's begging them. He's handing them the jewels. He's like, just take these and go. They're worth a fortune. It's his coffin. And finally, Willie he realizes he can't convince Jason. So he backs away. He goes, "You're right, Willie. I wouldn't listen to you." And he lifts the coffin, and that's where we see McGuire's face is smiling, and it's very similar to 211. Then we see it not smile. Then we see Barnabas's hand come around his throat. And then that when they cut back, Jason is dead, and Willie's like, "You killed him," and I really love what John Carlin does when they go to pick up the body. He doesn't. He can't do it at first.
Yeah,
he goes,
"Is my friend."
Yeah, he was my friend. He goes, This man didn't treat you good. He goes, he hated you. He wanted to kill you. He goes, he was still my friend. He remembered. Willie.
The line I would have written would be, "Well, doesn't look like much has changed, Barnabas." And this is new to me.
Right. I tell you, too, there's a lot of... It's so... Dark Shadows is so great. You got a lot of great scene stealing in this episode. John Carlin does steal this episode, too. But another is Sharon Lynn's really steals this episode. Yeah. Just standing in the basement of the old house, and you hear London Bridge is falling down, the instrumental, and they're doing this as they're going up the steps with Jason McGuire. They're out of frame, and she's just right there, and it's so good, criminally good.
It is. It's a very eerie episode. It's beautifully shot.
Yep.
The last shot in the mausoleum, I think, is really beautiful.
In your mind, is Lela Swift one of the greatest directors that doesn't get enough mention?
Oh, Joel. You want me to be honest?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's very easy to want to romanticize Dark Shadows directors. There was not a lot of room. I think all of them were capable. I think certainly Lela Swift was apparently a lot nicer to deal with than Henry Kaplan. But I've talked a little bit about this before. TV directing does not leave a lot of room for art. They all have an artful eye. They all can do interesting things, but they don't really get a chance to. TV directing is more like traffic directing, making sure the actors are in the right place, the cameras are in the right place, and everything is moving at a very specific pace. They really don't have much time to work with the actors, if at all. So really what you see in performances is the actors, by and large. It's going to, Henry Kaplan would go and give his stupid, grade notes, B- or whatever, that the actors love so much they still speak bitterly about today. But they are real technicians. And so it's kind of like asking, and I would love to be able to say yes, and this person's Billy Wilder of Dark Shadows and so on, but it's kind of like saying, do you think that was one of the best Uber drivers of all time? If the ride just goes absolutely smoothly, there's no traffic. It's like, well, I mean, they drove the car. And that's what they do is they drive the car. I was real lucky early in my career. I got to be the assistant to Alan Feinstein. Have I told you about Alan Feinstein?
I'm not sure if you have or haven't, but go ahead.
Alan, who was, I think, a bad guy in Looking for Mr. Goodbar and a few other things like that. He is the guy who, on the first episode, when Carolyn is, or the second episode, when Carolyn's doing the monkey or whatever in the blue whale, he's the guy who's going.
Yeah,
that guy. We all know that guy. Well, Alan was a serious actor, though. I mean, he was on Broadway. He was a hell of a guy. And he did his episode or two of Dark Shadows. And he had done a lot of TV. And so Alan gave me more of my education than almost anybody else. I was his assistant. And Alan was the first guy to say, you don't get anything from TV directors. TV directors, they're there to set up lighting and kind of point at a mark on the floor. And so that's... And Jewel, I dig where you're coming from. Yeah. I would love to be able to blow this up more. By the same token, when you get a beautiful shot or an interesting transition, that is the director. Yeah. And unfortunately, though, it doesn't happen often enough for me to be able to go, that's a Lela Swift cut. Or, only Henry Kaplan would move the camera in such a way. The only exception, I'll say, is the lovely and talented Dan Curtis, especially in the Time Trap episodes that he does, which is the 1795 flashback where Barnabas wills himself back in time to save Victoria Winters. So, several of those were directed by Dan Curtis. And I feel like that was really Dan's warm-up to do House of Dark Shadows, that he was even then, he was getting his hand in. And I think he had directed a few others, but not much. Dan, no one was going to tell Dan Curtis no. Right. And Dan Curtis did do some really interesting stuff with lighting and camera work. And his camera practically prowls. It's great. So that's what I got for Dark Shadows directors. I know you with me, I'm like a water fountain you go to, and it's like somebody turned on a fire hose. So on behalf of me and everyone at the Freud Institute, I apologize.
No, I appreciate your honesty most of all. I mean, that's the thing. I really, really love the way she directs this episode, though, because
good for you.
The way she shoots, the way they shoot the coffin scene, to the way they shoot especially inside the sanitarium. And look, Kathryn Lee Scott, anytime Kathryn Lee Scott's on screen, she really just takes over. And what a scene stealer she is in this episode. I love it. I really love her
performance. Isn't it remarkable?
Yeah.
How many things are going on here. You have this great stuff between Willie and Jason, great stuff between Willie and Barnabas. Barnabas has some really good monologues, the almost human kind of beat. And then with a dramatic roundness that we don't normally get with the show, following back up with that at the mausoleum. Yeah. Barnabas gets to be really reflective, but it's never boring, nor is it repetitive. You get the great scene with Robert Geringer and Grayson Hall. Then they bring in Maggie, and you've got all of that, and then Sarah. I mean, this is a packed episode, and if you don't think it is, and you privately told me you don't think it's a packed episode, Jewel, and you told me you hate this episode and you want to burn all of Dark Shadows, but that's neither here nor there. No, Jewel said none of those things. But if you don't like this episode, go back and watch 275.
Yeah.
Because I did watch 275 today, and God, I love Dark Shadows. But it is an episode specifically designed for viewers with absolutely the broadest standards of what pace should be. Yeah. It is the slowest, most repetitive, just, there's another scene of Joan Bennett and her daughter sitting around forgiving each other. After like the 30th or 40th, I was done. It is, and so here's the interesting thing about 276 is that especially at this point in time, when they realize Barnabas may not be a pan in the flash, we are getting a show at war with itself. We have this old format of, let's put 1 pound of flour in a 10-pound sack and just kind of move it around enough that it maybe looks full occasionally, versus a vibrant, interesting, supernatural drama that's profoundly character driven. The day before we got Secret Storm. Now we've got something else. I remember being a kid and watching this on broadcast television, 1 episode a day, no Dark Shadows fandom, no magazines, nothing to guide you. And it really felt strange because like every other day, maybe every 2 days, you'd get one of those 275s that just crawls along. And as adults, we can sit around and kind of rationalize it being better than it is. But in fact, compared to 275, which does all of the character stuff, all of the regret, all of the meditativeness, and it tells this cracking good story that's just dense as hell. Well, there's no comparison for me.
I think 275 does a really, there are great setup episodes throughout Dark Shadows. 275 does a really great job setting up 276. Are you still there? And I'm going to kill the internet. Hello? I'm going to, the internet. Oh my God, the internet. Hello?